It's time to ignite your soul and unlock your full potential. Join us on Beneath the Helmet, the podcast exploring firefighters' health and wellness. Hosted by retired Fire Chief Arjuna George, our podcast is the perfect place to start your journey towards becoming the best version of yourself. So come on, let's join the conversation and find out what sets your soul on fire.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Welcome to Beneath the Helmet. It's almost year end of 2023. Pretty incredible to look back on the amazing guests we've had over this year. And today I have somebody to wrap up our season who's been a huge kind of supporter for myself through the podcast industry, but through my book. And I've been on his show, and I'm also doing a webinar coming up shortly that we'll talk about as well. So today I get a chance to sit down with Steve Greene, a huge supporter of the fire service. He's also in his 8th season, which he says in this episode might be his last season with 5 Alarm Task Force. So anyways, we're going to chat about his experience growing up through the fire service, and what we're really going to hone in is on his retirement from a early medical induced retirement. So he talks about his recently published article in Crackle magazine, which is a top-notch magazine. I highly recommend people checking that out, where he talks about what happened after we walk out the door, especially for those who retire unexpectedly. So we have a bit in common there, because that's kind of my situation as well, but his was a bit more physical injuries where he had to depart and could no longer do operational tasks. And as you listen through the episode, you'll start to realize how important and how special the fire service is to Steve. Even though he's been out of the fire service for a number of years, his heart and soul is 100% in supporting, training, educating, sharing the message of behavioral health, but also operational tactics and strategies and ideas and innovations through the fire service. We also have an amazing webinar coming up that's going to be hosted by 5 Alarm Task Force. And myself and Andy Clark will be the presenters for this webinar. So I hope you check it out. There'll be a link in the show notes to actually purchase your tickets. Very cheap deal. And there's a chance to win some great prizes as well. And this is a regular occurrence for 5 Alarm Task Force to hold these webinars. So I'm very honored to be able to present alongside Andy Clark, who's another expert in the field of mental health, wellness, sleep, nutrition. So I think together we're going to be able to provide you some great value. Hope you enjoy this great episode with Steve Greene of 5 Alarm Task Force. It was my honor to sit down and chat with him. So I hope you enjoy the show. Until next time, stay well. All right. Welcome back to the show, everyone. I have another great guest on the show today. A personal friend of mine, a fellow podcaster, firefighter advocate, and just a good podcast friend of mine. We have Steve Greene with us today from 5 Alarm Task Force. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Thank you, Chief. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show. You've definitely been a huge advocate for what I'm doing on the show, but also for a lot of other podcasters, a lot of other authors. You're really an ambassador for people out there making a difference. So just want to thank you for that.
Well, it's my honor, and what I define it as is my way of giving back to the service that I love. I didn't get to serve as long as I wanted to, but I still love it. I've never let it leave me. And this is a way of saying thank you by giving back.
Love it. So, Steve, tell us a little bit about who you are and kind of how you grew up through the fire service, and then they'll kind of lead into your retirement from the fire service.
Well, I started out at 7 years old when our fire department in our community showed up for a grass fire, and while everybody ran to the backwoods, I ran down to the engine and met the engineer, and he gave me a lollipop and showed me how the pump worked. And I loved firefighters from that. I didn't want to be a firefighter because even at the age of 7, I knew I wanted to be a rabbi. And but I loved firefighters, and I made my parents take us to the 5 stations in our community. And when I could ride my bike, I'd ride around larger community, around our community. And then when I got my license, I was driving all around Greater Boston, visiting every firehouse I could. Even before I got into EMS, I was very active in the Red Cross in our community. Got every badge and patch you could you could earn all the way up to water safety instructor, and actually was on 2 major MVC emergencies coming home from my then girlfriend's home, and worked with suburban Boston Fire Department because I was first on the scene, and another driver stopped. I sent him to make a phone call. There were no, this is in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s. We didn't have cell phones. They were just a dream in somebody's head. So he went ahead and I started tending with my little basic first aid kit to the patients. And the fire department said, "Hey, man, we can't thank you enough." I said, "I'm not a man. I'm just a kid." He says, "No, you stop to help people. That makes you a man."
Nice.
And that was it. But I still planned on being a rabbi. And when that didn't turn out, I wound up in North Carolina for a job as the director of education for a synagogue down there. And one day I drove down the street right after we moved in to go to the supermarket. I saw a big brick building with big doors open up and shiny red trucks inside. So I said, "Oh, well, I'm going to walk into a new firehouse in a community I've never been to." And within 5 minutes, the captain walked over to me, introduced himself, showed me around, and he asked me, "Could you stay a moment?" And I said, "Yeah." And went away, came back, says, "Hey, the chief happens to be in. He'd like to meet you." I said, "No, you don't have to do that. I have to get back. I was wearing a suit from my office." And he said, "No, he wants to meet you." He says, "You're a college graduate, you told me, right?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Oh, he definitely wants to meet you." So I went in and met him, and nice little Southern gentleman, short and great little accent. And he talked with me and he said, "Mr. Greene, if you ever come to this department, you'd be our first college graduate." I said, "No, come on, you can't, you've got it." He goes, "No, we've never had a graduate apply."
Hmm.
He says, "So I hope you'll join." I said, "Chief, I'd like to join, but I have a full-time job. I can't be a hired firefighter." He goes, "Oh, no, we're not hired. We're volunteer here. We only have a couple of paid people, but everybody else is volunteer." I said, "But I work." He goes, "I know you have a big job. You work about 60 hours a week. Captain told me about it." But he says, "You could still squeeze in some time. We'd like to have you. I really would be like to have you." And I said, "Well, I'll have to ask." He goes, "Well, just take this to read about." And I said, "Okay." I got home and opened it up, and it was the application. There was nothing to read. It was just the application. Spoke to my wife, Ruth, and we didn't have any kids then. And she said, "Look, if you want to try it, do it." And that was it. That was the first step. And
Beautiful.
luckily, not only did I love what I did, I got to meet the guy who's still my best friend today, 40 some plus years later, from 1977. He was sitting next to me at the meeting and found out. He said, "Why are you all dressed up? Are we supposed to dress up for this?" And I said, "Yeah, didn't you get the menu?" Because he was wearing a t-shirt and gym shorts. He says, "No, what do I do?" I said, "I'm just kidding. I came from work." He goes, "Where do you work?" I said, "At the synagogue over on the city line." He goes, "You're Jewish?" And I said, he goes, "I'm Jewish too." We shook hands. "I'm Steve. I'm Rich." That was it. That was the end of October of 77. And I just spoke with him on Saturday morning again.
I believe he's the other person in your ebook, Fish Out of the Water. Is that right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's right.
He's
Yeah.
my buddy in there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the mentor I talked about is Roger.
Right.
Roger. Right. And
Yeah.
Roger's still down there in Greensboro. And whenever we go back to visit our friends there, we always have dinner with Roger and his wife. A great mentor, a great guide who really should have been a teacher,
Mm.
because that was his way of, he just knew how to convey to 2 guys. My buddy Rich had a little bit of background running with Bethesda Chevy Chase Rescue, but I didn't. I could use regular hand tools, hammers, hand drills, my managed of screwdrivers, socket wrenches, but I didn't know any power tools that the fire department was using at the time. Now, our department didn't have uh, hydraulics yet. We had to come along and a porta power, and that was it. Those were our hydraulics,
Mhm.
but that was it. But it was a great department. I learned so much. He sent me to the Rich and Roger to the State Fire College 3 years ago. I got certified in firefighting 1 and 2 in those days from North Carolina, then hydraulics pump engineer. And then 3rd year was high level rescue, which was interesting for an aquaphobic kid like me who had been aquaphobic since age 5. So it was great. It was a great opportunity to see myself grow and develop. Became an EMT right away as soon as I could sign up for it. And then I was lucky enough that 2.5 years later, the people from EMS who were based on base 3, which was one in our response district, put my name in. They were looking for a fill-in, and they said, "You got to reach for this guy, Steve Greene, because he's responded on a bunch of calls with us, and he's just terrific. He knows exactly what to do. He knows his stuff, and he'd be great. And they called me in, and they offered me the position of just a fill-in. It was a great opportunity to expand my horizon a little bit. They gave me in-house training to what was then the paramedic level there, and I loved doing that. And so the fire service and EMS became real focus in my life, And I have to include my wife's life as well, because plenty of times I wasn't around, or I disappeared in the middle of the night. It was tough, especially once we moved up to the Syracuse, New York area, where I found another department right around the corner from the house. Uh, as we drove by the first day going to the market, and I had a big smile on my face because she didn't see the sign, but I saw the brick sign at front that said DeWitt Volunteer Fire Department. And I had this big grin on my face. She goes, "What are you smiling about?" "Nothing." She goes, "Oh, did you just see that fire building that we passed?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Don't even think about it." Well, that I did think about it and joined again. It was okay. I loved doing what I got to do, but I wasn't allowed to do as much as I wanted to do in this department. Whereas my first department, I was allowed to grow. They encouraged me to grow. This one was an old boys neighborhood kind of group. There was a bar up the street, walking distance from the firehouse, probably not even a quarter of a mile. And a bunch of the guys would go there after training meetings or business meetings. Well, those were Friday nights, and I often had to be at services, so I couldn't even be at the meetings. But even when I did make it, I went home to my family. I already had our first daughter, and I couldn't hang around on a Friday night till 11:30 midnight to drink with the boys. I worked 80 hours a week at my career job, and I made the top 10% of the 3.5 years I served in that department. Actually, it wasn't 4 years. Yeah, 4 years in that department. But I just wasn't allowed to grow. I was allowed to drive. Oh, yeah. They did allow me to learn how to drive the Suburban. Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, the Chevy Suburban. But I couldn't plow. I wasn't allowed to learn how to plow. I could just drive.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it just stayed with me. And when I got injured with that department, it was a tough blow. Andy and I, our mutual dear friend, Andy Clark, Andy and I have been talking, and she said to me, I talked about the two traumas in my life that I recognized was when I couldn't help my dad because I didn't realize that I was with him when he got sick in Massachusetts. Massachusetts in '84, had not passed the paramedic bill for the entire state, only for the hospital district, Boston City Health and Hospitals. So when the ambulance got there, and I had already been doing his vitals and doing all the BLS I could, I said to the guys when I got to the ambulance, I said, "All right, I need the IV kit, I need the med box, I need the radio." He says, "Steve, we don't have it." I said, "What do you mean you don't have it? Just give me whatever you do have." He goes, "We don't have any. We are EMTs. We're not paramedics." And I said, "What?" If I was 2.5 hours over the line west of here, I could take care of my dad right here. He says, "We can't. We have to get him right in." So he was in VTech. And I actually did a precordial thump that put him back into sinus, got him to the hospital, and he did okay, got upstairs. He was viable when we got him in, got him upstairs. And we were talking, he sent me to get my haircut because he didn't like having long hair, because when he had his first heart attack at the age of 44, he was in the hospital in those days for over 3 weeks. My dad, looked like me, just this hair left, but he'd get his haircut every single Saturday morning, and he couldn't get his haircut, and his hair grew, and he couldn't shave, so his beard grew, and he never liked beer. We always thought it was the Beatles and stuff like that. He says, "No." My mom said, "No. Dad had no problem with you guys playing in the band, and it was that when he saw your long hair," and mine was never really long. It was like maybe 3 times as long as this is, and he'd get upset. And he said, "Get a haircut." And that was the reason why. And I understood him so much better from that point of view. And yet he never complained. So I feel bad when I do complain, because he made it. He went through that rest of his life, those next 25 years after he got sick. And he had other heart attacks and stuff, one full arrest when they moved to Florida. But he never complained. He said, I don't need to talk about it. This is who I am. This is what I got. And we go from there. That's kind of dad he was. And couldn't have asked for a better man.
That's good. Nice to hear that.
Yeah. And so it was that injury that Andy said, that's probably one of the biggest traumas in your life. You couldn't stay in the fire service. And you're right.
I can hear it in your voice for sure.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is how I give back.
I love it. Well, it truly means a lot that somebody who's been outside of the fire service operationally for so long is still so passionate and so giving to the fire service community that I, I don't know anyone else like you, honestly, Steve.
I think if more people gave some payback to the people they credit or whatever they did that made them a better person, this world would be a better place.
Got that right.
We have to learn and remember, as my parents taught all three boys, Mo, Larry, and Curly, as the joke goes, in our family. I'm the middle of the three, but I don't have Larry's hair, unfortunately. But he said, you always have to thank the people who help you. Now, for my dad, that was giving a tip. And that's what I do. When people help me out, service people come that can do things that I can no longer do, like when I took care of my own home, I make sure when they do a good job, I thank them. All my service people always get a holiday tip from us because that's the way. My dad taught us kind of men to be. And so me giving back to the fire service is just ounces of who I am and what all this means to me. And I think that if more people would remember and give back, we would be in a better place.
Got that right. Yeah, it's all about paying forward and just treating people with respect. And yeah, you're hitting all the key points of being a good human. That's plain and simple.
I think if we could also agree to disagree, whether it's politics
Yeah.
or tactics or whatever it is, in and out of the fire service. If we could say, I understand and respect your opinion. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I agree that you have the right to that opinion. And that's one of the reasons why I don't engage in any political conversations online. I don't want to deal with that. It's not important. It's not as important to me as what I do as a person. And I've made some listen, I'm no angel. I've made some whopper of mistakes in my life. A couple that, will eat at me to my last day. But this is a way of trying to be good again and
Totally. Yeah.
being the right person.
You're doing it. You're on the right track. You're on the track.
Thank you.
So what was it that it was an injury that made you leave the fire service?
Yeah, I had
a fire service related injury, or was that a personal?
Yeah, when I went to my very first North Carolina State Fire College, where they were doing the 1 and 2, I had already, in the 8 months I'd been on the volunteer department, I had been on the nozzle 4 times on working fires. I try to make, not only did I try to make every drill I could, but I would often go down during lunch hours, or if I had a half day teaching, then I'd go down and spend time just trying to suck up any knowledge I could. And so I had been there 4 times. So of the 4 teams, I was put on team 4. And since I still was the one out of all 16 people in the class that had the most time, had to be the last person on the nozzle. So this was the last burn of the last day. I had this kid behind me who was working then what we call public safety. I'm not sure if you have it in Canada, but you're both police and fire at the same time. And he didn't like fire at all, excuse me, and he loved police work. But if you wanted to keep the job, you had to go to this fire college and take the course. Well, we're at the front door, and the captain said, "You guys ready?" And I said, "Yeah." And I told him, I said, "Remember, all you got to do is what I did for you. Lean into me when that water starts flowing the water. Lean into me, get that back pressure off of me." Okay. And so he lights off the room. He says, okay, guys, go get it. And just as I'm opening the bail, you hear a set of bells go off. So I reach mine to my set, and mine weren't ringing. The captain checked theirs, and all of a sudden I could hear from behind me, "Oh my God, I'm out of there! I'm gonna die! I'm gonna die!" What? What bell? It's his bells. He's going, "I'm gonna die! I'm out!" He rips his mask off and says, "I'm gonna die! I'm out of here!" And he drops the hose and runs out the front door. Now, by this point, I've already got the bail all the way open, flowing 150 on a smoothbore.
Yep.
Inch and a half. We didn't have 1 3/4 yet. And the captain is maybe 10 feet away from me on my left. So if I drop this hose, he's a dead man. There's no doubt about it. So I kind of crouched down low and started backing my way away so I could aim the water now at the fire, knock the fire out, at least blacken it down a little bit so he's safe. This kid's out the door, and I don't know what's going to happen to me. But I stepped back. There was a hole that had burnt in the floor from one of the other burns. And my left leg went all the way down the hole up to the groin, blew out my left knee. That's all I knew at the time because the pain was excruciating. What we determined after the fact, several years after the fact, was that my back pain that started minimally at my last year down in North Carolina and then got worse up in New York, probably happened when the tank and the steel frame, because those days we didn't have aluminum yet, everything was steel. That tank couldn't fit through that hole. It was only my left leg. My right leg got bent backwards. Yeah, so like my right heel was up at my butt on the floor, and it hit that at L4, L5, and that probably is what did that damage. But we didn't know at the time. So I yelled to the captain, I'm hurt with my mask on. He says, "No, you're tired. You're tired." I said, "No, I'm not fucking tired. I'm hurt." He says, "No, you're just tired." I said, "Screw this." Tore my mask off. I mean, I got the fire was knocked down. I'd gotten it out. Even down on the floor, I didn't let go of the hose. I kept it going just so it was darkened down completely. There was no active flame. And I pushed myself out of the hole, crawled to the wall, used my hands to climb up the wall, got to the front door and tried to take a step and fell tush over teacups, as they say. And then everybody wrapped around me, cut my bunker gear off and rushed me off to the hospital. But as a knee injury, as we know today, x-rays don't see squat. So unless it's a break. So I had to wait and go have an MRI. And this was, again, very early back in the day. So they could look through the scope in those days, but they couldn't do the surgery through it. So they had to do an arthrotomy, which opened up the knee and did that. And so, okay, I was better. I did rehab. I was able to go back to service in that fire department. Moved up to Syracuse, had decent, I had one time with a knee problem, wasn't bad. So he cleared me after 3 months, said, "You can go back in." I said, "Okay, great." Went back in, and then I blew it out again on a stairwell. And he says, "And that's the ball game, Steve."
Oh, so early. Sheesh.
So yeah, I went to, and he was nice enough. He was a personal orthopedist, but he reached out to the fire surgeon of our department and spoke with him, and he said, "We got to do something for him because I mean, this is his passion. Besides teaching, this is what he loves to do." So they offered me the position of fire inspector for the village, and I took that and finished my year off. I had left the synagogue, was working in, my brother and I opened up, we had purchased several licenses for video stores. This is before Blockbuster ever came up, called National Video, based in Oregon. And I think they were in Salem. And so we opened a store in Syracuse, and I was working there, but I was still doing the inspection thing. I guess the biggest fun thing out of it was that I was called to the theater on 9:30 on Friday night that Ghostbusters opened, because they had people sitting on the stairs, on the stage, in the aisles and stuff like that. So somebody called, and I was the inspector on call for that weekend, and they had to go up there and throw everybody out of the theater and come in back with their stubs, and had to write a ticket to the manager for overselling the movie and stuff. So I had to work that weekend a couple of times up there, but it was enjoyable to do. again, teaching, because instead of just writing a ticket for somebody who was smoking a cigarette at the gas pumps, I would try to make it a teachable moment and tell them how dangerous it was. And for the most part, they were good. They were good. They didn't get upset. I just gave them a warning. I didn't give them a written ticket. The judge got the warnings as well, but I figured you don't always have to write a ticket to be a bad guy, rather than what if you can improve the person's behavior. Um, the
Totally.
only one I couldn't help and I agreed with was when we had somebody who I had already ticketed once for parking in a fire lane in front of a drugstore right across the street from our station. Was parked there again when we had a fire call in that plaza, and he was right by the hydrant. So they looked at me and said, "Do we do it?" I said, "Do it." He parked there, and I already ticketed him, 6 weeks ago for the same car, same license plate. I had my book. I was able to go back and see the carbon copy. I said, "Do it." And we took out his rear windows and put the feeder hose through it. Of course, it was only 3.5 inches, 3 inches in those days, not nice LDH like we have today,
Yeah.
but it still felt good to do it.
Nice.
My orthopedist and the fire surgeon said, "We just can't take that chance because, yeah, you'll be better after rehab and the surgery and stuff like that. But what if it happens again? What if you're on the stairs and, something like that? It, could be, and somebody's behind you or you're behind somebody and you fall." And I understood. I didn't like it,
Mhm.
but how can you not understand what they're trying to get across? They weren't trying to hurt me. This had nothing to do with the fact that they didn't like the accreditations I came with from North Carolina. It just had to do with safety.
For sure. Yeah.
And look, as we both know, as hopefully and every listener who listens to this knows, that's the number one issue in our service is we have to operate as safely as we possibly can. We have to do our jobs, but we have to do them as safely as we possibly can.
Yeah. Couldn't
That
agree
was
more.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, that
So
was it.
you recently, congratulations, by the way, you recently just got your article published about kind of this journey about what happens after we walk out the door. So maybe tell the listeners of Beneath the Helmet a little bit about this article, kind of just summarize it a little bit, and maybe a couple of nuggets that you'd like to share about what you learned through this process.
Well, because I went through it, um, and I was cut off after 8 years, 8 years that I adored, I loved it. I paid a price, sure, but that doesn't mean we have to love it any less. That's just the nature of the beast. And over the course, even before we really kicked into the behavioral health initiative, and still back in the days we were concentrating on the cancer initiative, I was seeing on social media all these people getting congratulated on their retirements after 25 years, 30 years. I remember 34 years, one person. And when I sent them a message of congratulations and best wishes and, make sure you get some hobbies to do and keep yourself busy, I started hearing back a little bit that they weren't finding it easy because this was their other family that they lived with, whether it's 24/7, 24/48, 24/72s, whatever it was, or even a volunteer. This was your other family. Whether you lived with your own parents or you were parents and you lived with this, whatever, this was your second family. And all of a sudden, you're cut off. You're welcome, but you can't really be with them every shift anymore. And how does that feel? And a lot of people, including one, I guess, relayed to me that one of their senior people took his own life because he was so depressed that he missed his family. And a lot of times, as I think, I don't remember now if I wrote it in the article, but, Bill retired and the firehouse has a knock on the door. The guy look on the camera. Bill's here again. How many times do you got to come back? He's only been retired for 3 months, but why does he have to come to lunch? Yeah. So wasn't Bill part of that family? What didn't he pay his dues? Paid 30 years, 34 years, 25 years of dues in to be with you guys and train new people as he became a senior firefighter in that department. Where's the problem with Bill coming to visit? And the same thing happens when you're disabled out, like I was. You're all eat up with what you love doing, this whole other world that you live in of helping people, and this other family that we have that take us in, no matter our race, color, religion. We're hands together to help other people in our community. And all of a sudden, the rug's pulled out from underneath you. And, when Andy said to me, that's probably one of your biggest traumas, I realized how bad it was for me, but I never categorized it as a trauma. But she's absolutely right. It is. I live with that trauma every single day. We have a couple of calls that Rich and I always talk about, really bad calls that we were on. And we share that because we had a tough time then, but as you well know, those were the days of the 3 magic words for behavioral health. Suck it up.
Yep. I was going to say,
Suck it up. Right.
Up. Yep.
Right. And that's what I was told that night when I came out of the locker room with my tears, my face all red, and I'd been throwing up and crying and everything. And the driver on the engine that day came around. And he said to me, "You all right?" I said, "Yeah, I'll be okay." He says, "Was it the call?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Suck it up." We can't say that anymore. We can't let somebody live their life in their traumas. We're all going to have them in this field. Any of the 3 branches of first responders, because we see it. We see it. And when your eyes are open and your ears are open, and you see the postings of how many of our firefighters, how many of our law enforcement officers, how many of our EMS personnel are taking their own lives because of the trauma, what they've been put through, and the hours, and everything else that we face. We have to realize that if all we're doing is saving the people in our communities, then we're not doing our job. Because we have to save the people in our departments. They have to come first. Because if we don't have them, then who's going to take care of the people in the community?
So, Steve, what would you tell somebody who's listening right now who's considering retirement in the next 6 months, a year? How could they prepare themselves a little bit better to have a smooth transition?
I would say, number 1, talk with your family about your upcoming retirement. Let them know that's going to be a big change for you. You may not even know yet how big a change it's going to be, because sometimes that love, that passion keeps burning, and we expect everybody else to honor that burning that we have. And they don't always do that. So talk with your family, have their support. Sweetheart, kids, do you really think this is the right thing for me to do? Are you guys okay knowing that I'm not worried about the money, but about me, that so you need to have their support. That's the most important thing first. I also think that you need to talk with your department heads, your chiefs, or the chief of the department, and let them know and ask them, how is there a way for me to keep that I know I can't work anymore. I can't ride the engine, can't ride the rescue, but can I play a volunteer part to help out around the firehouse maybe a couple of times a week? Get some hobbies if you don't have any. Now, to me, growing up, most firefighters that I got to know and meet and got to know them even from the communities around Boston, either had good hobbies or they had second jobs that they loved doing. And they looked forward to their day off from the firehouse so they could do the job and make some extra money. We had that at our own home. We had a couple of firefighters when my dad decided to put the wooden fence around our whole backyard, he had got a referral to a couple of firefighters from our town. And they came and did all the work, and they were great guys. But they couldn't finish it all one day because they were on duty the next day. So they came back 2 days later and did it. So if you have some hobbies or you're involved in a second job, see what more you can do. In other words, to really enjoy your hobbies. Make plans to enjoy them. You may not get to spend all that time with them in these final 6 months, but make plans to how you'd like to enjoy those hobbies when you have time, whether it's fishing, whether it's sailing, woodworking, whatever you want to do that gives you that inner peace, because that's what we all need to find. I think you bring that up in the book, in your book, uh,
Finding joy.
finding joy,
Yep.
right? Finding the stuff that makes us happy that's outside the fire service. Doesn't mean turning our backs on the fire service. It just means I love that, but I love going out fishing. I love that saltwater spray, and I love, bringing in a good salmon or something like that. That's great. And get passionate about the hobbies that you really care about. That way you're going to have a more of a cushion, I believe. And I've only learned this from not having done it because I wasn't afforded the opportunity. Mine was just, being cut off at the knees, pun not intended, but um, so I didn't have a chance to prepare. And I was lucky that the department gave me the inspector's position to spend my last 9 months with the department still doing something productive that I felt productive, was helping the community. It didn't necessarily have to help the department, but it helped the community, and I felt good about that. So that's what I would recommend, is just prepare for your retirement, not just the bash they're going to throw you, but prepare for what life is going to be after that last shift day that you're going to be there.
Yeah, so true. I know so many people that have been in there for 20, 30 years, and it's a real struggle in that retirement phase. So for you, how would you support or give some nuggets to people who somewhere down the line they find themselves medically retired as well? How can they transition through that difficult challenge? Any tips you could give our listeners?
Number one is don't look to blame.
Mm.
I had somebody to blame because what that person did would not even be tolerated on the fire ground today. But and even the next morning at graduation, when I showed up with crutches, I didn't think I was going to even get the certificate because I didn't finish the drill. But my two buddies with me, Rich and Roger, and they said, let's see if he has the cojones to come and apologize. And he didn't. And they want to go beat the crap out of him. I said, no, just forget about it. Just forget about it. He's young. He's immature. He hated the fire side of what he had to do. I said, it's not worth it. You guys, let's just sit down. You guys get your certificates. And we head back home to Greensboro. And yet they called me out. And I was very surprised that I was going to get the certificate. But look, we know the day that we sign the paper, whether a volunteer, career, WUI, makes no difference. We know there's a risk in this job. Whether you get paid for it or you do it, you get paid out of the love in your heart for it. There's a risk. Some of us make the ultimate sacrifice, doing the best job that we feel we've ever had. But sometimes we get hurt. And sometimes it's enough to take us out from this career or passion that we have. So again, when it happens, you're not prepared for it. That I'll vouch for. But you have to go through your wailing, your lamenting period, because you need to. I think Andy would back me up in saying you need to know when to mourn, when to be sad, because we can't always have this wonderful smile on our face 24/7. It doesn't work. Crap happens in life. That's the reality. So you have to start coming to terms. Okay, what do I do from now? So when we left Syracuse and we moved to Florida, my first job going back into the synagogue administration work, I decided to keep up my subscriptions to the trades. My wife said, why? You're not in it anymore. Yes, so doesn't mean I'm not interested. I still love it. I loved it before I ever got in. I was 7 years old and I loved it. Why would I change now? And I started to visit companies again. I'd go to fire departments wherever I lived, and I would go and visit tell them who I was, showed them my badge. I was always welcomed warmly, often invited to the lunch meal or have dinner. They were just, I found that they were very understanding of my situation. They've all known people who've gone through similar situations, and they were supportive. And I think that that's what led me eventually when my online friends like Andy and Nick and these other guys started pushing me to do a podcast. And I said, yeah, that's great. I'd love to do that. What's a podcast? And they said, well, you've been in radio. I said, yeah, I was on school radio, college radio, and I did a different fire show, but it was on radio. It wasn't what's a podcast? So they told me. And my friend Joe DeVito said, Steve, you're a teacher, you're an educator, and you're a firefighter. He says, you got a lot to offer. He goes, look, why are all of us on this group in Twitter? Why are we all telling you to do a podcast? Because we all see how much you still know about the fire service and you care about it. You're the kind of person we need doing these kind of radio shows on the internet. And I said, I don't know if I can do that. And he goes, well, take a look into it and see if you can. I did. And we started in 2016 after probably 3 years of them cajoling me and pushing me. And
now you're in your 8th season.
Now we're in the middle of our eighth season. Probably will be the final, I think. But
oh, really?
Yeah, but it all depends, how health goes, and if my wife decides will finally retire officially this time, because she's chose 2 other times and didn't decide to honor it. So we'll have to see if she's going to retire or not after the school year. But I still love doing it, though. It'd be hard to give up if I'm still able. I might not be able to do it as frequently, and I'll have to stop caring about the numbers, where I fall up in the numbers, because it's the numbers have really not been important to me. It's the listeners and the viewers that are important to me, because it's not me. I'm just the moderator. I said this to you when we before we started ours. My job is not to be the guest of the podcast. My job is to be the host and the moderator, so that my guest can speak and I can just ask the guest could you qualify that so our non-firefighters could understand it? And that's the way I see my role. I'm not the teacher or educator. My guests are.
Okay.
And that's what I love, is getting guests, returning guests, new guests, like Chief Fantasy tomorrow. Once I saw the video of their stuff on Smithsonian Channel, I just knew I had to reach out and give it a try. And I was very lucky that he accepted it. And it's a great topic that most people don't even know about, because if you don't live in California, Southern California, or along the West Coast, or Alaska, up through Alaska, where we know we've had these horrible fires over the worst of them over the last 10 years. And especially this year in Canada, this year in the Southeast United States, Greece again with many. Israel went through a batch of them earlier in the spring. These, with global warming, global change, climate change, these are not going to go away anytime soon, unless we find a better way. So their response is something that I want other people to hear about.
Cool. That'll be a good episode.
I think, so I just think that when we get disabled out, it's a terrible shock to the system, and it is traumatic. And I will not try to tell you, oh, it's easy. Just get yourself better and you'll be fine. Physically, you'll mend. But mentally and in your heart, it's like it's been ripped out of you.
Yeah. It's a process, right? And you have to process that. You can't suck it up and just, hold it in. You got to let those emotions, just like you and Andy were saying, you got to process that to get it out of your system, to work through it. And then hopefully you're going to see some light at the end of the tunnel, where you have options now, or new doors open up for you, right?
And your book, because of your journey, where you weren't disabled out, you took yourself out because you felt the injury that nobody
Yep,
else could see.
exactly.
And I think that the great men and women of the fire service in both our countries and in all countries have to learn that they have to take care of themselves. As we say, even in our PSA, the first person, if you want to take care of other people in your community, the first person you have to take care of is yourself, whether it's your physical health or your mental health. You have to take care of yourself. Otherwise, you will not be at the best level to take care of the people that you swore to protect.
And taking a knee is brave and it's courageous and it's the smart thing to do for that person, right? So taking a knee should never be looked at as being a negative, wimpy failure. It's they've come to the conclusion that they need to take a break. Maybe it's a short break, maybe it's a long break, maybe it's for a break forever, but they need to take a break.
Right. And slowly but surely, more and more departments are, through HR, are creating mental health days off that are separate from your sick days. And I think there's not enough of it happening, but I think it's a great beginning that we're seeing that and people are talking about that. You're Dave Wiklansky, who will be on my show after the first of the year. And David's been on before. Early on, I got to meet him back in 2016. I think I first met him when the first Great Florida Fire School came back. And we just kind of like hit it off. We had a breakfast with a couple other firefighters at the hotel one morning. That was one of the greatest discussions in my 45 years being attached with the fire service one way or the other. One of the greatest discussions we've had. And one of them, and this was long before the behavioral health initiative was talking about, is this: we got to take care of ourselves first, not just our bodies, but what about up here? Look at all the crap that we see. You
Totally.
just can't see all that and just say, oh, life goes on. What a la-di-da. It's got to take a toll. And I said, you think so? And David said, absolutely. It takes a toll on all of us. Whether we admit it or not, it still takes a toll. You go under the bridge on the turnpike, and even if you don't have the automatic money thing attached, they get a camera, and you're going to have to pay your dues to the Turnpike Authority one way or another. So you're going to have to pay your dues one way or another. You just choose: are you going to choose the easy way to do it, or you think you can do it all by yourself and you don't need anybody's help and you'll get over it? And then you find out 6 months later that you're worse then than you were at the beginning when you had the chance to jump on it and help yourself.
Yeah.
And we have to help our members avoid the stigma of behavioral health issues. It's okay because we all have them. Just some of us are more brave than others to admit that we have them.
Yeah.
And
Every single human.
you stand out as that shining example because you weren't just a firefighter. You weren't just a line officer. You weren't just the assistant chief or a battalion chief or a deputy. You were the chief of department. And you got pushed into that job at a very young age that most other chiefs never get to see. But those next 20 years that you thought were going to be wonderful had a terrible price for you and for many of us. But you decided, I'm not going to let it rule me. I'm going to rule it.
Yep.
Even if I have to be neighbors, I may not beat it, but I'm going to learn to be neighbors with it and deal with it. And that's why your example and this book has meant so much to me. And your interview with me has been, I lost number of how many downloads and plays it's had. I have to go back and look at the stats. But your story is coming out at probably the most needed time of all for it to be out there. Not just for you and for me, but for other chief officers, no matter what level, from battalion up to the chief of department. because they're going through the same crap. They all started as firefighters, and we all loved that job. And some went to line officers, but they were still out on the apparatus doing the jobs. But once you go, you get the battalion chief and you get to do some, but there's a lot of administration. And then anything higher than that, you rarely get to go on even the good calls. And when you're listening to it, you're sitting in the office going over budgets. And can I afford this new apparatus? You're not seeing all the fun that your men and women are having out there on that call. And I don't mean fun negating the seriousness of our jobs, but you don't get that anymore.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the action. And all of a sudden, you're going, wait a minute. What am I doing here?
I didn't sign up for this.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. We don't sign up for disability, being disabled out. We don't, though we know the risk is there about making the ultimate sacrifice, but we're willing to take that risk. But when you're ripped away from your passion, as I was, as you did, but you did it on your own. And that's what I give you so much credit for. I would say you have to be maybe 1 out of 25 or more
Mm.
that had the courage, who knew you were in that position, but you had the courage to do something about it. Even though it meant you had to step away completely from what you've been doing for the last 30 plus years to find yourself again. But
And
you did it.
I hope there's more people that realize that, right? And I hope that 20
That's
grows to 40 to 60 to 80, 200, 500.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's from the lessons that I've tried to teach and share. And that's what the article is about, because we need to understand that when our people, our buddies are either retiring out or are disabled out, there is an emotional change that comes over every single one of them. And nobody could tell me the truth. Nobody could say to me, oh, no, it didn't bother me at all, that I would keep a straight face for. Because I can't, because you're human. And we all have certain passions in life. And when we can't do those passions, it hurts us,
For sure.
whether it's our job or it's a hobby. I love to go fishing. But when I had to give it up for 2 years because I was too sick to go. It just gnawed at my belly all the time. I would watch the fishing shows on TV, and oh man, I wish I was just out there, just in my canal right down the street, just go for a couple of bass or a couple of crappies or something like that. Couldn't do it. And it bothered the hell out of me. And I'm not a pro fisherman. I just love to do it. Just to me, the worst day fishing is still better than the best day at work.
Yes.
And it's peace, it's quiet for the most part. And I love fresh water or salt water. But that was my escape. And I did that a lot when we moved to Florida after, 8 months after my injury. So we came here. I couldn't serve. There was no volunteer department where we were living. So I turned to fishing because I was only 7 miles away from the water, from the ocean. And so I found that, and I found other things. And this podcast came up, and I love doing that. So I still find myself affiliated. As a matter of fact, when I went to that first, my friend Joe invited me to that first Florida State Fire College, and he came to me it started on Sunday, and he came to me on Tuesday afternoon in the hotel lobby. We bumped into each other, and he came up to me, put his arm around me, and he whispered to me, "Hey, Steve, do you feel like a firefighter again, being here with the rest of us?" I said, "Yeah, Joe." Passed me a mic. Man, that's all I want to hear.
Right.
That's the only. He goes, "I know you're doing the video and the photos, but that's the real reason why I brought you here, is I want you to feel part of it again."
Beautiful. Good friend. Good friend.
Yeah, good friend to do that.
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's a lot of, kind of important nuggets that you just shared for those who might find themselves in the same situation that you or I was in, right? So thanks for Thanks for sharing that. You mentioned the behavioral health initiative quite a few times. Tell us a little bit about what that is and how you're involved in that.
Well, my position, because of what I went through, that this has always been a part for me, is to thinking about what happened to me and when I got torn away from what I loved, and what happens when firefighters with a lot more time than I did, in my 8 years, have to retire, and how they feel. Plus the fact that one of the things that we've talked about already in this discussion and many of the other podcasts is what we see in this job. Once in a while, we have good things like we deliver a baby.
Mm.
I got one in my 8 years, one baby in North Carolina.
That was always a dream for me. I
It
always wanted that.
was it was it was scary as all get out. Luckily, I was the third person on that rig, so I had another guy and another gal with me, and but it was amazing. Tears in my eyes, but happy tears, to do something like that. But the other hand is that it's when it's not the baby that we deliver, it's the baby that we lose, or we've worked 35, 40 minutes doing CPR manually on a victim, and we got a little bit of a sinus rhythm going, and then they arrest again. So we start CPR again, and we work and we work and we work. We may have the old, like I had my day, the thumper. Now we have the new versions of that to do the automatic
AEDs.
compressions. Right, not
Yeah.
just the ADs, but we have the new version of
Oh,
the thumpers.
yeah,
The
yeah, yeah.
new,
The
yeah.
compression. Yep.
Um, uh, but when I remember that when I joined EMS, when they hired me, they offered a pin for every 5 saves that you
Mm.
got, and I was working on my 3rd pin in just
Wow.
my 11 months with them.
Wow.
Uh, but it wasn't just me. I mean, it was
Mhm.
me and my crew, and we got the 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 credit for each one. But it's the ones that you don't revive for whatever reason. Maybe it was too long before they called. Maybe they tried doing CPR and they didn't work, so then they called, and it was too late for us to get to. The motor vehicle crashes, I know we used to call them MVAs a lot in my day, but we've stopped calling them MVAs because there are MVCs, because they're collisions. And today, few of them are accidents for both parties. Usually one is an accident for one party and one is not the accident for the other party. But we see the results of those. We're not there to see it, God forbid, because we know what's happening on our roads and highways with distracted drivers, uh, infotainment systems that play videos now, drivers watching videos as they're driving, and they're penetrating our safety zones when we're on scene. Anywhere from a 2-lane highway to a 12-lane superhighway. We're not safe anymore, no matter what we do. We saw the end of last week, I think it was Thursday or Friday of last week, 2 police officers and 2 firefighters were struck by a DUI driver who went around the barricades to plow right through their work field, their work area. Thankfully, they were all taken to the hospital, but all with basically minor injuries. Thank God for that. So we see this stuff. We see the results of these collisions. We go to construction accidents. We go to drug overdoses in difficult neighborhoods that we're not used to because it's a different milieu than we live in or we grew up in. We don't have time to start looking at people because of the color of their skin or their belief method. We have one job to do, and that's to serve those people on their worst day, just like Mrs. Smith and the way Chief Bruno taught us. On her worst day, even if it's just her cat's up a tree, that's her worst day. And our job is not to make fun of her. Our job is to go there, tell her we're going to take care of her problem. We climb that ladder, we get that kitten down, hand it to her, and say, is there anything else we can do for you, Mrs. Smith? And we part with a smile. That's our job. But we see a lot more than that, and it takes a toll. And anybody who thinks that it doesn't take a toll, talk to vets who come back to this country after Korea. There's still a few of them around. After Vietnam, after our wars in Iraq, Iran, Syria, etc. Ask them how easy their jobs were. And I know my dad, may rest in peace, was a cook in World War II in the Pacific. And he was on the third wave in, so he really wasn't in the top action at the beginning. But he saw a lot of Japanese soldiers in those days who would do anything to try to sneak up on them and kill them. And it was the only time I ever heard my dad use a derogatory term when we were looking through one of his albums, and he had some pictures there, and a couple of them had some dead Japanese soldiers. And he said a slang term that I never really had heard him say before, because he never said that about any other ethnicity before. But I understood, I was old enough at that point to understand what he was talking about, what he went through. My uncle was blown out of a tank crossing over from France into Germany. The second tank over the line, he got blown out. He was the only survivor. Rocket-propelled grenade hit their tank, blew the turret off. The other 4 guys were killed. He was blown out, severely injured, but survived. So that's the way my uncle and my dad saw that. And I understood that. But today, we don't have that freedom. Today, we have to live and serve with everybody in our community. We can't judge them because of their belief system. But what we see, the results of the squabbles and the arguments, and no matter what group of people we're talking about, we all have problems. We all have arguments. We all disagree at some point, and they get bad sometimes. As firefighters and rescue personnel, first responders, we see that. We see the results of that. And that takes a toll on you. EMS, one of my first major rides when I got hired, was at a bar, a biker bar, where police officers had come in. The guy was wielding a gun. They said, please turn around slowly and just put the weapon on the table or on the floor. Slowly. And the guy, because bartender called him because the guy had shot somebody in the hand. Police officer said, please just turn around slowly and put the gun down. We can take care of this very easily. He whipped around with a gun at his waist level, and they opened fire. And we got in. He had 9 hits out of 10 slugs. We hit 9 times. We did 2 IVs in the right arm, one in the left, and then we did another one. We did a cut down on the ankle. Just do another one, just to get enough ringers and saline into him. He was gone before we got him to the hospital. And the doctor said, you never would have made it because he got nicked the aorta with one of the bullets. But that was traumatic. I mean, I did everything. I was focused. I did everything. But when we went to the follow-up at the hospital, because our actual ops manager came out and responded on that call as well with us. He said, look, this is going to be a tough night for everybody. Just understand that. Now, this is 80. And I was saying, wait a second. Just 2.5 years ago, I was told to suck it up. This ops manager is telling us this is going to be difficult for everybody. Okay, I know you guys have the rest of the shift to go. You guys did great. You did the best you could job. But just don't dwell on it right now. But it's going to bother you. Just understand that. You can always come to me to talk to me if it does. From that moment on, I knew that there were people who cared about what we saw and what we did. But it wasn't enough over the years. I didn't see it again really in the Syracuse area when I was there. And it took a long while before I saw other people willing to say there's more to it than just responding, taking action, picking up and going back to the barn. There's a lot more involved in being a first responder than just those 3 levels.
Totally. So the Behavioral Health Initiative, tell us a little bit about who that serves and what the main purpose and mission is for that.
My understanding and the way I've tried to work with it is to get as much information out to the men and women first responders in our country, in our great neighbors up north. And I hope that, we've had our podcasts listened to in up to 42 countries. And I'm hoping that everyone that has heard that and any podcast that's try to teach something about who we are and what we do is heard, because the only way the purpose of in my understanding, the Behavioral Health Initiative is to deal with this part of health that we haven't dealt with ever before because of that suck it up attitude. Because we thought it would make us weak. Firefighters can't be weak. We are strong. We're Popeye. That's who we are. But we're not. We're human. And you can look at the greatest bodybuilder in the world. That doesn't mean that guy or gal doesn't have issues in their head because of what they had to go through to become that number one bodybuilder. You can look at an Olympic diver, Olympic fencing artist, whatever. Don't think that their life is happy-go-lucky with all the practice, all the dietary restrictions they have to follow, everything like that. Life is tough. Maybe when I grew up with, parents from World War II, my in-laws, may they rest in peace, were survivors of the Holocaust. My mother-in-law was in Auschwitz. My father-in-law was in a work camp, and survived. Thank God, because I have my wife.
That's it. Yeah.
My wonderful wife and my beautiful sister-in-law. But the fact is that life isn't what we want it to be. Life is reality. And so we know that certain incidents, certain happenstances can have an effect on us. If it affects one, it's going to affect more. And we have always been afraid to go to that person in our department and say, Kathy, are you okay? You're not that smiling, bubbly self that you've always been. The last 2 years I've been here. Everything okay with you? People are afraid to do that. Oh, I don't want to butt into their business. You might be saving their life, because if Kathy's demeanor has so seriously changed, she may not open up to you, but at least she knows that somebody noticed and somebody cared enough to ask her.
Maybe Kathy doesn't even realize it herself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that might be that first footstep towards her learning about herself and getting help, if necessary, for her. There's only one person saying a couple of words, "Are you okay?" can make the difference, might make the difference in that person getting better or losing that person. And so I hope, in the way I see the Behavioral Health Initiative and the purpose of this webinar, that you and Andy Clark have so graciously accepted our invitation to present that, is to share this idea. You have so much to share from your book and your consulting and coaching, what you do, because it's your personal story. You're not the physician. You're not the psychologist writing the book about my patients. This is your biography. Today, you're letting me tell my story of what the trauma I went through just by being disabled out. And yet nobody ever saw it like that. I didn't, until she just said that to me 2 weeks ago. So if each of us makes a pledge to say, make sure that to those around us who we know well, we work with on a regular basis, we may even see socially, because a lot of us, especially with the IAFF and volunteer departments, a lot of times families do get together and they're involved. That was the one thing I loved about the department in North Carolina. A lot of times family birthdays of the kids, even the adults, were held at the firehouse. And there was a little party involved. And sometimes it was just certain invitees, and then they opened it up to anybody else who wanted to come in as well. And I thought that was wonderful, because it became a family event not just a firefighter event. And our spouses and kids were there. Unfortunately, we didn't have female firefighters in those days, which I did not agree with, but that was the mode in that time. But if we decide that we have the ability, just like when we answer a call, the officer, that first officer decides what we're going to do and tells us, the regular petty bourgeoisie, the grunts, what we have to do. And we do it because that's our officer and they're guiding us. We can each be an officer of behavioral health in our department. We can look out for the people that we care about, the people on our shift first, including yourself. Because if you don't take care of yourself, you have no business reaching out to anybody else. Because you may not know what to say until you look in that mirror. That was a great lesson my dad taught us. He said, you got to look in that mirror and ask yourself, because that guy in the mirror or that girl in the mirror knows every single secret you have. And you have to, so when I got this bad grade in freshman exam, my dad said, did you do enough study out? I said, Pop, I really did. And I counted down. I spent 11 and a half hours in the library in 2 weeks' time researching that article. And I retyped the article 4 times before I handed it in. He says, okay, so all it means on that topic, which was not something you're interested in, you just had to take it for a gut course, you were a C+ student. He said, also remember, you're not in high school anymore. You're in a college. You're in an affluent college where there are students from all over the world. And some of these students are brilliant. He says, that doesn't mean you're not smart. It just means they're smarter. And that is not a negative impact on you. You've always been an A student. Just go in there and take the rest of your courses and do your best to be an A student or a B+ student, because I don't care what your student marks are, as long as you're trying your best. That's all I want you to do is try your best. Because I didn't try that. I only did what was safe. So that's the way I learned my lesson from him. And
that's how you grow, right? Is 100%.
Exactly.
That's how you grow. Yeah,
exactly. But I think we all have the ability, if we choose to, because we made a big choice to come into being a first responder. We know that is a big choice. It is not an easy choice. Not an easy choice for our families to accept either. But we also have to admit to the fact that we are fragile. Our egos are fragile, sometimes to a fault, but our psyche is definitely fragile. And you can pretend all you want that you're macho. You don't need any help. You ask that guy or girl in the mirror, they're going to say, what the hell are you talking about? You don't need any help. Are you crazy? You are crazy because you're telling yourself that you're fine and you are not fine. And I'm telling you, you're not fine. And I know if nobody else tells you, I'm going to tell you. And that's what that mirror does.
Yeah, it's a good lesson. It's a good lesson. So you mentioned this webinar, this amazing webinar that you got coming up. Tell us a little bit about that before we close up.
Well, it's January 23rd at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. The webinars are our way of raising funds for our foundation account. The foundation account is what we put together in the middle of the pandemic when we launched the corporation from the podcast called 5 Alarm Task Force Corp. We are a certified, IRS certified, nonprofit, 501c3 organization in this country. And the goal is to be able to help our brothers and sisters and or their families in dire need. We've been blessed to be able to hand out nearly $6,000 in just 3 years. I would say 95% of that went to the families of brothers, in this case, brothers who paid the ultimate sacrifice. And what we do, yes, there are local, state, and federal benefits for the families of a firefighter who dies in the line of duty, but they don't come right away. And our purpose is to, once we vet the story, often trying to get a hold of the PIO or the chief of the department, once we vet it, we send a check for whatever amount the 3 members of the board select, we get a check directly to that family or to the fund for that family so that they will have some emergency cash right on hand to use. And so this webinar is part of that program. It is called Thrive on Duty, Optimize Your Sleep and Stress. And as we mentioned a little bit earlier, you are one of our presenters, and Andy Clark of 911 Lifestyle and PKI Health will be the other presenter. And we are focused for your listeners and our listeners and firefighters and first responders from our two countries to join us. Tickets are limited because of it's a Zoom meeting, not a Zoom webinar because of the cost. So it's a Zoom meeting. So with our account, we allowed 100 attendees, which include the presenters, the host, etc. So it's a little bit limited. Tickets went on sale at 12:01 a.m. this morning. Tickets are just $20 in the United States. They might be a little bit higher in Canada because of the difference in the currencies. But all the proceeds, every penny of the net proceeds of ticket sales goes to directly, by the way, thanks to our friends at Eventbrite, that money is deposited. We never touch it. It goes directly into our foundation account. And again, this webinar is strictly aimed at behavioral health initiative so that we can have you and Andy share your wisdom, your experience with our attendees. And by the way, folks, this is an online webinar only. It's nothing in person. But you both bring, and you were both on within a couple of months of each other on the show, basically. And you both brought so much and will bring to this webinar so much insight from your own lives. And I think that's what concretized it for me, is that you weren't just two specialists in behavioral health teaching. You're teaching from your own, both of you are teaching from your own personal life experiences, what you went through and how you, like the phoenix rising from the flames, you both rose from the flames of your difficulties to be excellent leaders and almost diagnosticians and helpers for those of us with behavioral health issues. And not only that, but the two of you are beacons that show that it's okay for a fire chief to say, I'm not right. I'm not who I was. I'm not the right person anymore. And Andy, being the wife of a big city police officer, and what he's gone through, what you've seen with him and his colleagues, and then what happened in their family dynamic because of et cetera. Again, another phoenix rising from the ashes to now be able to share with others those traumas that the two of you went through, but how you were able to find a way to rise up again and be the person that you wanted to be, even if you weren't doing the exact same thing. In your case, you didn't go back to being a chief because you had done that. You had put your time in, and now you've grown to do one thing, to reach out to others in that same position who need the help and don't know necessarily that they have it maybe within themselves to do it, or that you can teach them that, or give them the advice of what to do and where to go to do that. And I think that's the purpose of this, for the two of you to speak from your own personal experiences, that yes, we're just like everybody else. We're no better. We're no different. We just found our way, climbing, breaking the nails, bleeding, climb out of the abyss of where we were emotionally and mentally to a new level, a new heights, and be successful once again.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge honor for myself to be on this webinar with you and with Andy. So I just want to thank you for the invitation, and I really appreciate the platform to be able to share like you said, my story and how I feel like I'm actually thriving today than burning. So yeah, it's a real honor.
And I have to do it. I apologize, but if you haven't purchased the book Burnt Around the Edges and you're a first responder, I don't care if you're a firefighter, law enforcement, EMS, you could be a recovery operator, you could be a road ranger, you need to read Burnt Around the Edges. Okay. It will tell you and show you how someone winds up in those deep depths and finds their way out of it. And beyond that, the chief shares with his readers simple steps that we can do on our own. And I said to him when we corresponded last week, I said, I sent him something else. I found out something else health-wise that I want to share with him, but that we really see the same things at the same time together. And I've learned, I'm reading the book for the second time now, more deeply as a person with the issue that I openly admit to, and learning how the chief got out is helping me find my way back to where I could be today, besides my physical health issues, but I can be in a better behavioral health state by some of the things I'm reading. I guess I'm about 65% through it. And I'll probably read it a third time in a couple of weeks, just to learn more. So I really need to thank you for sharing that with me and to sharing that with us in the fire service. I think it is one of the most important reads that you as a firefighter could have. Yes, there are great textbooks on tactics, getting through the door, all the other things, VES, all that. There are great books for that. This is one of the best books you can read about who you are inside of you as that firefighter, that police officer, that EMT or paramedic, because we all have that same makeup. And we never know how that board's going to tilt. And so you give us a guide and you share with us how you got your board on an even plane again. And as you said, you thrive today.
I don't know. Thank you. That was unexpected and bringing up some emotion for sure. So thank you for sharing that and being so supportive of my journey as well. So
Well, when you first came on and you said, "What do you think about me doing one?" I said, "Go for it." I said, "You've got enough to share," and I said, "Just go for it. If you need me for anything for equipment, anything, just call me, and I'll help you any way I can." And somebody said to me, first time I made the announcement that you launched the podcast, somebody said, Why would you publicize his podcast launch? He was just your guest, and now he's doing his own." So I think I need him.
totally.
You think I'm the demigod of podcasts? I said, there are a gazillion great firefighting podcasts out there. I said, but there are only a couple that tell this story and address this issue. I said, so number one, yes, I usually do 13, 14 other podcasts at the end of every episode of 5 Task Force. We list other firefighting podcasts to listen to. And several of them started with me. They were my guests, and then they came to me and said, "We want to start our own," and they did it. And people say, "Well, aren't you bitter about that?" I said, "Why would I be bitter? I couldn't be more proud." It's like, the mother hen. These are the chicks I laid, and they're going out and finding their own way in the world, and they donate. They're giving back to the fire service. Why would I not like that?
Yeah, I think sharing the message of other podcasters is all you're doing is sharing a message.
Exactly.
So it's like, why wouldn't you? So,
I said to somebody, this does not detract. Whoever wants to listen to my podcast will listen to it. Whoever doesn't want to listen to it doesn't have to listen to it. I'm not here for everybody. I'm just here for those who want to listen.
So saying that, Steve, share how people can connect with you and how can they listen to your podcast and find out more about Steve.
They can go to our website, is www.5-alarm-taskforcecorp.org, and I'll bring you to our website. My biography is go down to the bottom part of the page. They'll give you a quick link to the bio that's in a different area of the podcast. You can reach us at the time at either the email dalmatprod, D as in Delta, A-L, M as in Michael, A-T Tango, prod, one word, P-R-O-D, dalmatprod at outlook.com. Or you can always drop a line to Steve G at, again, the numeral 5-alarm-taskforcecorp.org. Either way, the message will come directly to me.
Awesome. And you're on a lot of social networks as well.
Yeah, we're on X/Twitter. We're on Instagram at 5-Alarm Task Force. We're on LinkedIn under my name, Stephen, with a V, S, middle initial S like in Sam, last name Green with an E at the end. And on Facebook at facebook.com/the numeral 5, and in caps, A Alpha, T Tango, F Foxtrot, C Charlie.
Oh, you could have made that any easier, eh? That's a mouthful.
That was it.
Well, Steve, it's an honor to have you on the show, to learn from your wisdom of years and years of, being in the fire service or being around and surrounded in the fire service, sharing your nuggets about kind of your process of going through being disabled out, and your wonderful article in Crackle magazine. That's an accomplishment. Yeah, great job. And it's just, I appreciate the support that you've given myself over this journey as well. So I just want to acknowledge you and the great work that you are doing. So thanks for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it. It's great to be with you again.
Fantastic.
We'll see you in the spring.
Sounds good. All right, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this conversation with Steve Greene. Until next time, stay well.
Thank you for tuning in to Beneath the Helmet. We hope that this podcast has provided you with valuable insights into the world of firefighters' health and wellness. Remember, caring for your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being is crucial to achieving optimal performance. Join us next time on Beneath the Helmet for more inspiring conversations. Until then, stay well.